Welcome to Solemn Vanguard channel. Today we're having a look at my Granblue premium deck with which I won a shop challenge in the Netherlands. There we are. We haven't had a regional yet, so I can't update you on how well it worked there, but it at least did very well in this shop challenge. I went 5-0 overall. The deck was completely undefeated until the finals, where I lost one game but won two, and so then I snagged the buy card. So overall, very happy with that result. So I will be going over this deck and tell you what choices were made, why. As always, this beautiful playmat by Zero Damage Gaming is available at the link in the description. We also got Baskirk. I actually wish I had Baskirk here right now, but sadly I don't. I will be receiving it very soon, and then I will always play on it when playing the Granblue deck, because it is very, very cool. So we start with the primary grade 3, our Baskirk. And the main thing he does, just like in my Aquaforce Premium by the way, is give a protect marker. Apart from that, I really don't want to use his skill. Some people say, oh, he's great when you ride first and you can get some aggression already, and sure, but given the format we're in right now, you usually don't really want to waste that counterblast. Either a good player will deny you counterblast the next turn, or you will be giving them so much counterblast that their first stride is super good, or you're going up against Gize, where you won't be getting any more counterblast beyond the one you just abused with Baskirk. So overall, I really don't want to use that. It's only when I can't stride for some really odd reason that that skill becomes relevant. So if you want to go budget, if you want to go really budget, you can just get to rare. I think it's Negro Breach or something like that. It also gives a protect marker. It's also a grade 3. You don't really need Baskirk. And now some people would say, hey, if it doesn't matter which one you ride, why don't you run 4 Skull Dragon as your primary ride target instead? And well, I do run my 4 Skull Dragon, so don't worry about that. This card is extremely important, but he cannot be the primary ride target. Why? Well, this deck, one of its big win conditions is winning on Megiddo. And so if you ride your Skull Dragon, that means you also need to keep a Skull Dragon in hand in case you need to ultimate stride, because you need to ditch the same name. So this already ties up 2 Skull Dragons out of your drop zone just for riding Skull Dragon as your primary target. So you don't want to do that. If you then also want to be re-riding to get more protect gifts, which is relevant in quite some matchups, then you don't have Skull Dragons at all. And Skull Dragon is such a good card, you don't want to tie him up. I explained this in my Aquaforce Premium video as well. Some people didn't seem to understand the reasoning, but overall, when a piece is very valuable on rear or in drop or in hand for your ultimate stride, you don't want to tie it up as your Vanguard. You really don't want to do that, because it automatically ties up 2 cards already out of your 4, and then 2 will be in deck maybe, and it will just be an inconsistency mess. It's much better to be trying to ride this guy. You can re-ride as much as you want. You can keep 1 in hand for your ultimate stride, and you usually can just stride with other stuff. Keep 1 in hand, re-ride, like you're super free because of that. You don't want this as your primary ride target if you're going for that Megiddo kill turn. Now Skull Dragon 4 off, of course, just like I said, he's awesome on Megiddo. He's amazing, but really amazing on any turn. Like, what you will usually do is you will try to go for multi-attacks where you have this guy swinging for 50 and more easily, like easily. His numbers are bigger than Alexandro's numbers, even quicker. And then you will use your Columbard or your Nightstorm or something like that to get even more multi-attacks in with this guy yet again. It's just an amazing beat stick. He's like the whale from back in G, but infinitely better. Now, since we're still on the topic of grade 3s, some people may be wondering, why not Nitros? And well, this is a really, really hard topic, because I've already had a little debate with a cool YouTuber. I will probably put a link somewhere in the description, because he's like more into Granblue than I am. I'm mostly Aquaforce, and then on second place we have Granblue and Great Nature. But so basically, he's still on the Nitros train. I'm not. I believe the protect marker outweighs the value that Nitros's on stride brings, at least in the current meta. If you want a really in-depth debate on that, like, let me know. I will make a separate video about Baskirk versus Nitros, but for now, I will just keep it at the fact that I believe the protect marker has more value than the Nitros archetype brings. And then for the final grade 3, we have our Nightstorm, which is just a attack extender. He creates even more multi-attacks. I've said this before in my premium Aquaforce deck profile, we will be rewriting a lot, and so having some extra grade 3s doesn't really hurt. It will just make our strides more consistent. Apart from that, if you have too many, you have protect markers, you have your PG, and you have another way to PG, so discarding really isn't an issue in this deck. Next up, we have 3 of the new Ruin Shade. Reason for that, this is probably the best ride target, and if your drop zone isn't looking too great, having this guy either early or even on your first gouache turn really fuels that drop zone so that you can extend your hand. That's essentially what a drop zone is. The drop zone in Granblue is kind of like a second hand, and that is like beyond broken. That's also why I believe Chappie the Ghosty could be a really problematic card as the game progresses. Fetching in any game is super strong, and so Chappie, we'll get into it later, but fetching is great. But extending your drop zone is as well. That's basically like a tiny untargeted fetch, if that makes sense. Having this is amazing. Not only can he hit by himself, reaching that 13k, he also fills up the drop zone, and it's just really good. If you ride this guy, you're pretty sure that you will have a kind of good drop zone even on your first ride already. Next up, we have 3 Colombard. I always want to see him in drop for the easy reason that he always extends an attack. And extending an attack is amazing in this deck because every single meta deck right now, apart from Gize, has so many damn attacks that in order to punish hand, in order to really whittle down hand while also building your own, you really need to have some form of multi-attack. And without Colombard or without Nightstorm, this deck doesn't have that, so I need to see him. If I was getting behind on a game, either in playtesting or the shop challenge, it's always because I don't see this one or I don't see the next grade 2. Next, I'm running 2 Cannoneer. Now, I will say, I would like to change a few things about this deck. The only reason that I haven't changed it is because I wanted to show you exactly the deck I won the shop challenge with. But overall, I would make a few changes. One of those is this Cannoneer, because this card is so damn amazing. Like I told you before, if I was getting behind, it's because I didn't see him. He's too damn important, because what he does is he's essentially adding hand. He's giving you a +1 whilst also having an unrestricted retire from your opponent's field. Like, think about it. If you go first stride, you can nuke a starter, you can nuke any piece, and apart from that you get to draw a card. Back in the Nitros days, we didn't really value him as much for the simple reason that we had to use way more counterblast because our multi-attacks with Negro Lazy and Negro Bone required counterblast, so we couldn't go ham with it all the time. Now that that's no longer the case because we don't have Lazy and Bone, and also Lazy and Bone only hit 11k by default, meaning their multi-attacks aren't really that strong either. There's still some things you can do, but overall it's more limited, and so we no longer use them because I'm not running Nitros, so I don't have to use that counterblast, meaning his counterblast is now no longer that expensive in comparison, meaning I can go ham with him. So first stride, I will usually use him in some fashion. There are plenty of pieces that getting rid of them is just too damn good. And apart from that, you plus your hand. And that's really good in Granblue for the simple reason that you have your protect marker, you can PG out of anywhere, literally anywhere. You always have a PG. If you're playing Granblue and you don't have access to a PG, you must be bricking beyond belief because, I mean, Granblue is just PG.deck basically. And so getting an extra card in hand basically allows us to also deal better with multi-attacks, which PGs don't by default. And also, you don't need hand to build field in Granblue, which is really important already. But if you then get to plus on top of that, we don't go minus our hand to fill field, and we also go plus on top of that, so that allows us to really build hands in insane proportions. So having this guy is fundamental to our game plan. Like, let's say I actually saw one Blaster Blade deck, yeah, so they play their Blaster Blade, but since they no longer run Exceed in the Blaster matchup, they can't fetch Blaster Blade. So when they went ham early, they gave us enough damage to do whatever the hell we want, and they still have that Blaster Blade on field. Man, this card is the funnest guy on the planet for us, not for them. Because they have their Blaster Blade, they can't fetch a new one, so they need to like get lucky or something or extend even more Blaster Blades. Blaster Blade also doesn't have resist on our turn, like he only gets resist on the attacker's turn with Gancelot. So the Blaster Blade is there on the Force Circle. They have maybe a Blaster Friend Bargle behind it, or maybe a Flogel that they didn't use, whatever. But you getting to go Cannoneer, Snipe Blaster Blade, it's the best feeling in the world. And then it's their turn, and either they have a Blaster Blade and they can do stuff, or they're literally vanilla. Like the whole deck goes offline because you just sniped that Blaster Blade. If you just had to attack it, they could just hard guard it, maybe Dismal if some of them run that, but they would hard guard it like they would almost PG the damn thing. But no PGing with this Cannoneer right here, so really, I love this guy. Next, we have one Captain Nightmist. Now, the idea behind him is that A, when you brick hard and you have to use Baskirk's skill, he can at least give you some kind of pseudo field because you can call him and then with him you call something else and like you can get something going at least. But apart from that, he's also important on the Negrosonger turn because, as you know, Negrosonger will attack and then he will call Nightmist because Nightmist gets the big power boost from Negrosonger, and then Nightmist can call something else, maybe Nightstorm, maybe a Skull Dragon, and then you suddenly have a new field of attackers right there. So that's why you run Nightmist, just for the Songer turn. If you really need him, you can just choppy and get him. And finally, we have one King Serpent. Now, back in the day, we ran King Serpent because you could use Nitro's On-Stride skill to fetch a Serpent, which would then get plus 3k, meaning it was an 11k and he could hit stuff. Is it 3 or 5? Well, whatever, he could hit stuff. He would Soul Charge 1, Counter Charge, which meant you basically did the Nitro's skill for free. You had 1 extra soul, which meant that with Gouache, you could then do 1 extra call. However, now that's no longer the case because we don't have the Nitro's On-Stride skill, at least in this deck. However, what he does now is allow you to countercharge and play for free basically when using the Nitro's grade 4. Because once you're on your second stride, you generally get to call full fields. Like once you G-guard it even once, you get to call full fields with Nitros on your second stride. Which means that you have your 2 things here, and then sure, you could call a booster like, okay, fun, I have a booster now, whatever. Like a booster behind the Vanguard does almost nothing in this deck. It's a PG either way because it has a crit. Meaning you can call a King Serpent behind her and automatically get back your counterblast, maybe even soul charge if you need that, but I mean, you're gonna do it, but you usually don't need it. But you call it behind and you get that counterblast back, meaning you can then use that on something like your Cannoneer or your Colombard, and that way the first skill, the Nitro skill, was free. So this basically, that's all it does. It makes Nitro's On-Stride skill free. That by itself is amazing already. If you're in a pinch, everything is going wrong, but you're already at GB8, you can also Galleon to get this back, and that way have counterblast for everything else. So even if they deny you counterblast, let's say you only had, let's say everything is closed even, you go Galleon, you get your King Serpent, you get your open counterblast, meaning now you can extend that because you have 1 counterblast, which you can then use on your Colombard, meaning you can do your multi-attacks just like you would. So having 1 King Serpent basically makes it so no matter how much damage denying your opponent tries to push, you will always get out of that. So usually, if I have a Colombard and a Cannoneer in drop, I will choppy this one out because I know maybe 2 turns later it will become very important. Getting into grade 1s, we run for Romario. There's a few reasons for this card. First of all, look at that art. Like, boy, look at that art. I loved this card back in the day already, but he was an 8k, so that was kind of sad. But now he's just amazing. And the art is amazing on top of that. So, few reasons. First of all, 10k guard. Now, this doesn't really matter in most decks, but in Granblue it definitely does. Because we are able to PG so much, we actually have the best matchup ever on anything that is Vanguard hitting reliant. So Overlord, like fuck Overlord. Dimension Police, fuck Dimension Police. No worries whatsoever. But multi-attacks can kinda hurt, because PGs don't really work that well against multi-attacks. But having that 10k shield in our hand, just like that, makes it much easier. Really much easier. So Having the new grade 1s really helps this deck. And apart from that, like, I wouldn't just run this because of 10k shield. There's plenty of grade 1s with 10k shield now that we don't run. So it's not just that, but it is one thing to keep in mind. Another important part is that he gets plus 4k if your drop zone has 10 or more cards. So what this means is that he is 12. Now, why is 12 important? Well, when you put 12 behind Colombard's 9, that makes 21. Meaning when you go up against an old Vanguard like Ange or Luard, you're already hitting magic numbers. However, if you put him behind a Nightstorm, the grade 3 tech we run, that becomes 23, which is a magic number against new Vanguard. So you will really often actually put a Romario behind your Nightstorm, which you call with Nitros or whatever the hell, and that way have a Vanguard that hits stuff. Well, actually, usually what you will be doing is you will have your Romario and you will put something like a Cannoneer in front of it, and then in the other column you will have something like Colombard, something behind it. You will swing unboosted with the first thing, like Cannoneer. You would just swing at a rearguard or something. You would then use Colombard to call Nightstorm, and then Nightstorm boosted by Romario, making your 23, hitting the magic numbers. So those magic numbers are amazing already. And it's free. Like, it hits magic numbers for free. It's great. And then apart from that, we also have that second skill, and that is, it's consistency incarnate. So what it does is, when you write it, Counterblast 1, put a card from your hand into your soul, put 3 cards from the top of your deck into your drop zone, and then you return 1 card from the drop zone into your hand. So what this does is, first, it fuels your soul in the early game, meaning that your gouache will get an extra call, and that is amazing because it will make sure that even if you do just that, you get 3 calls instead of 2. 3 calls means that you can do your Cannoneer, you can do your Grenache, you could maybe get a Colombard, you could maybe get a Ruin Shade instead of that, but usually you will try to get a Cannoneer and a Grenache because Grenache just gives you free counter charge. Cannoneer is, like I said before, just amazing in general, poking rear guards and so forth, but having 3 calls at least makes sure that you have 2 columns already. You get your 2 rear guard attacks, let's say. So just by riding him first, Gouache is already a better first stride. You don't need to go into fucking Obadiah, the worst stride in the game. Apart from that, like, it doesn't even end there. He also mills 3, so it sets up drop, which is amazing because on our first stride we want to have some options. But then beyond that, he does even more, because then you get to fetch something. If you're missing a grade 2, you get to grade 2. If you're missing Baskirk, you get the Baskirk. Like, essentially, this extends your opening hand with 3 cards. So you didn't draw 5 in the opening, you draw 8. You get to choose. It's so, like, the amounts of games I've had where, oh damn, I don't have Baskirk. Well, hope with Romario, poof, I get my Baskirk. Okay, problem solved. Like, this actually happened in the Premium Shop Challenge. I didn't have a grade 2 and my opponent started grade stalling. I was like, thank God. So I rode a Romario over a Romario, used his skill, milled a Ruin Shade, got the Ruin Shade to hand, then rode Ruin Shade over the Romario, used his skill, milled again. Like, it's just like a game changer, I would say. He does so much for so little. I would never cut him. I would easily throw Negrobone into the trash bin just for this card. This card is amazing. Then we have our 4 new Dancing Cutlass. Reason for that is I really like counter charge, and because we're not running the new Nitros, this essentially means that we never have the double Grenache. If you don't know double Grenache, essentially with Nitros's GB2 skill, you are able to use Grenache's skill, which counter charges 2, twice, meaning you countercharge 4 at the end of your turn. So this deck can't do that. Instead, we have our Dancing Cutlass, which on our Nitro's turn, I will often actually use his skill to countercharge 1, mill another card, which is awesome, and then I would just use Nitro's skill after that and just call over him, and then then he's in drop again, so you bound 1, but usually you can then use his skill again the next turn. So overall, that's what Dancing Cutlass is good for. Apart from that, if you can't stride, he will be another call you get to do. So if you use Baskirk, for example, you call your Night Mist calls a Colombard, Cutlass calls himself behind Colombard, then Night Mist on Rearguard, Colombard boosted by Cutlass on the Vanguard. He will call Skull Dragon, swing with Vanguard. Vanguard gets triggers and you put them on Skull Dragon. So stuff like that, even when not being able to stride. And just like I said, Counterblast in a pinch. If you're going up against Gizeh, Gizeh will keep you at 1 damage. So having access to King Serpent in the late game with Galleon, or Cutlass by himself a bit earlier on when you need the Nitros on stride for 1 Counterblast, that really helps. Apart from that, like I said, 10k shield. And it's actually really cool because I want to guard with him, because I want to get him in drop to get that counter charge. So overall, great card. Stops multi-attacks because I can just freely guard with it. I want to get him in drop and then give me that counter charge. Even give me that extra mill, but it doesn't really matter. Next up, we have 3 Tommy the Ghosty brothers. I would like to play 4, but I don't have room, so that's that. Overall, I do play 9 grade 3s, so striding usually isn't really an issue. Like, I haven't run in stride issues, but he's just stride fodder. I'm happy to see him because that means I can keep on re-riding Baskirk, apart from the 1 because I want to keep 1 for Megiddo. But I can keep on re-riding, giving me that protect and then just striding with him. Very happy to see him in my hand at all times. Then for the final grade 1, we run 1 Gust Jin. For those of you that don't know what it does, it's just an old PG, but old PGs don't specify that it has to be placed from hand. Now, the same can be said for the new PGs and the booster, but it doesn't work for the countercharge PG. So it has to be this one or the very newest one. Sure, the new ones are 7k instead of 6, but that doesn't really come up. Better yet, I prefer to write this 6, because that means I can damage deny certain clans by swinging with 6 at a 7. But so the reason we run this is because there's a combo with Negromora that allows us to PG from drop zone, essentially. Negromora is the G Guardian. So you G Guardian, get a PG from drop. Now the same can be done with the draw PGs, the grade 0 PGs. The problem is that you have to call 2 different grades. So if you call a draw PG, you then have to call a grade 1. And usually, you really want to recycle Chappie the Ghosty, which is a grade 0. So if you have the choice and you use Negromora, you get your Gust Jin, but then it's really handy to still have that grade 0 call on Chappie. So if you only had the draw PGs, you couldn't do that. That's why I played this 1. It does come up really often, and just having the 1 of is great, so I'm happy with this card. Next up, I have been hyping him up, but here are 2 Chappie the Ghosty. This card is the best card in the deck, essentially. He says, when placed on G, search your deck for any Granblue card and mill it. That's all. It's a Foolish Burial, but for Vanguard, where it's even better because you can literally, like, you have endless monster reborns. If you ever played Yu-Gi-Oh!, that's the analogy right there. Basically, this deck mills a lot already. Like, you mill with Ruin Shade, you mill with Romario, you mill with Dancing Cutlass, then you also, of course, you rode in the beginning, which you then Soul Blast with Gouache, the Stride, meaning you can set up your drop zone pretty well. But RNG happens, variance happens, and so usually you don't get every single piece. Usually you get like 3 out of 4 pieces that you want. Chappie is every piece. Chappie by himself will fill up the holes that this deck couldn't fill. So sure, you use your Romario in your Ruin Shade or your Gouache, you got your Colombard in drop zone, you got your Cannoneer in drop zone. Oh, there's no Skull Dragon, Chappie into Skull Dragon. Oh, there's no King Serpent, Chappie into King Serpent. Seeing this card is the same as seeing any other card in the deck. It's amazing, it's a fetcher. If I could run 4, I would. We just don't have the room, and we also don't want to brick by not being able to ride up. But overall, 2 is awesome. I want to see him in my hand at all times. Just a really great card. Next up, we have 4 Rough Seas Banshee. Now, I will say, I am a big fan of new crits. Not only because it has higher guard, it also gives more power. Seeing these in your trigger zone is like, it's a double-edged sword. You're like, ah, this could have been a new one. Like, they could have maybe set 2 to pass, and then you see this one instead of the other one, you're like, ah, now it's 3 to pass, and I'm not gonna do that. So that kind of hurts, but this card is broken, so I want to run it. Now, when I say broken, I don't mean like some busted combo, like not broken like that, but it's insane. It's really good. So what it does is you put it into Soul and you draw a card. OTT is the same thing in Sidechick Bird. Why is this so important? Well, if you see it early, it goes +1 into your Soul and you draw. So first of all, that increases consistency for your rides, but it also makes your soul bigger. And the bigger your soul is, the more calls you get on your first stride of gouache. So if you saw 2 of this, that means that by itself, without Romario, you're already looking at 4 calls. That's 4 calls instead of 2. That's really good. That is hard plussing. And more importantly, if you then Soul Blast them out with gouache, but you call them back and put them back into soul, not only are you fueling soul post gouache, you're also going +2 to your hand. So the best thing you could ever do is basically see 3 of this, push them all in before striding, then you stride into gouache, mill them and call them all back. And then you just went +3 just from striding like that. And then of course you could call your Cannoneer and maybe a Skull Dragon, like it doesn't really matter, but essentially refunds the gouache cost. If you then stride into Nitros later, you could easily call it behind the Vanguard, just like the same thought like with King Serpent, put it back into soul, and so that way every single stride is a +1 by itself to your hand, whilst also of course being the plus to your field. So just like the idea with Cannoneer, where you're not minusing your hand when playing Granblue because you can just call from drop zone, but then by calling you're also plussing your hand, is really, really good. Makes every stride basically a potential plus if you need it. Like often I will sit there with my 15 card hand going, do I need to plus? Doesn't matter, I won't. Then you go for the more offensive plays. If you're like seeing that you're playing against a clan that will attack a lot and so your hand will go smaller, you're like, I could plus right now. It is literally a choice. The deck is so privileged that you can choose whether you feel like plussing at the moment. That's what this card is for. At first, I didn't see that. At first, I just played all new triggers and I was like, fuck that shit. Why would I take this? I don't want a 5k power, but really, the amount of plussing that this card creates and the stronger gouache turns, like, literally makes up for it. The good thing as well is, like, you won't see Romario as your first ride every game. But seeing Romario or this, that chance is pretty high. Like, you're gonna see either one of them at least. Meaning, you will always have either a decent or a great gouache turn. Whereas if you only had Romario, half your games you would be playing like a really shit gouache turn. Next up, we run 4 more crits. I may like end up changing the amounts that I do run with. As I said, I still want to tinker with the deck a bit. I just want to show you what I won the shop challenge with. Self-explanatory, crits are great. 3 draw PG. As you know, we had to 1 grade 1 PG. And then 3 more, which rounds out our 4 Sentinels. As you know, draw PGs are fun. Apart from that, can call it with Negromora because it works like older PGs. It doesn't have to be from hand, which again is a really broken combo. Because, maybe I should explain, when you go up against Zoa, Zoa together with Antlion says your opponent can't guard from hand, I think with Sentinels, something like that. Generally that means people have to hard guard it. They have to guard 100k attack with zeros and shit. You can't do that, but you can G-guard. So you G-guard, you get this, and just like that, the Antlion combo is gone. Just gone, and then they lose the game. Amazing card. Then we have 1 Mick. Rip Mick, maybe one day we'll see him back at 4. But I don't think I would run him at 4 because like this is fun, like don't get me wrong. As I said before again and again, behind the Vanguard, that 1 spot is holy because depending on your drop zone, depending on the game, you can either call a King Serpent there for your free counter charge, you can call a Banshee there for a free +1, or you can call your Mick there, free +10k to your front row somewhere, whichever rear guard you prefer. So it's a very, very nice slot. It's a very nice rear guard circle where you just choose whatever the hell you want. And so Mick is one of those things that you can put there and give 10k to something. Apart from that, if you're afraid of decking out, it goes back to deck. Not really that relevant. You run this deck and you pretend like you don't play stands in general. Sure, it's fun to see a stand and restand something, but it really doesn't come up. You only play 1, you pretend like you don't, end of story. It's just here for the skill. Then we play 4 heals, because again, you want a G-guard. No, like enough said, I don't have to explain why we play heals. We don't play the counter charge, soul charge heals because we have plenty of counter blast. We have enough soul charge with Rough Seas Banshee. And then the numbers are just awesome. I love seeing 10k both defensively and offensively. So we run the new ones. Then for our starter, we run Grenache, the counter charger. Now I see some people playing Guiding Zombie, the new one, the ride draw card. I get why. I disagree with it like fundamentally because if you see Grenache going to your damage zone, like you're you're basically wishing for it to go to drop by itself. That is like insane. I don't care what you say. It's not gonna happen at all times. It also forces you to either Obadiah it away, which is a terrible strike that I don't run because it's awful, or you choppy it away, which means that you are one choppy behind again. You could have used that choppy to get a Skull Dragon or a Colombard or a Cannoneer or a Serpent, depending on what you need, but no, instead you had to choppy because you're fucking afraid that the most important card in your deck is going to damage. That's insanity to me. Instead, it is my starter. I don't call it out of the soul ever. It stays in soul because that way I get an extra call on Gouache. I'm sure it's gonna land and drop. I am 100% sure that the only damn card that gives me countercharge in this deck is gonna help me. I do not want to use Gouache or Obadiah to call something over Grenache because I called it out like a fucking idiot at the beginning and now I'm stuck doing odd shit, not getting my countercharge on first try. Like, it's such an awkward thing to call it out. I don't. It stays in soul. I ride Romario, it stays. I don't have a booster, that's no issue. Because I know I will have this card every turn and abuse the ever-living shit out of it. So great, it stays there. It comes out and then it just is part of all my calls every single turn. Every single turn I get all my counter charges just like that and I get the extra call of Gouache. And I know, by the way, that a lot of the Granblue crowd will disagree with this, maybe be angry even, but I don't care. This is the most consistent ass thing, the most consistent choice I've ever made in my life. Keeping it in soul is just the best thing. I don't know. Apart from maybe only seeing triggers when milling, this clan just can't brick, and I love that. Next up, we have our protect markers. We have our 3 Nagisa. I would love to just play these 3. Like, more than this doesn't really come up, but I just play 2 more Baskirk just in case that it does come up. I would love to just max bling it, but buying 5 of this would be like borderline insanity. Generally, I don't even see this one. I just play my Nagisas. Then for the Stride Zone, we have 1 Mugido. Now, my regular Megiddo, I really like the dragon, by the way, but it's in my Aqua Force deck. So for this deck, I use the Mugido instead. The Megiddo-chan, Mugido, whatever you want to call it. This card is just an alternate finisher, a really great one. I either win on this or Galleon. This deck really turbos to GB8 very easily, so either you win on Galleon or you win on this one. The win on Megiddo is quite easy. You just call a bunch of Skull Dragons. Apart from that, if you don't have all the Skull Dragons, you could also call a Colombard with a booster, so that you can go Skull Dragon dies, Colombard calls him back, and then you just go again. Now, do make sure that set Skull Dragon is the last dragon you attack with, because after calling it back with Colombard, you don't get to swap positions with Megiddo anymore. So do keep that in mind. If you do have 4 Skull Dragons, you could also get Nightstorm together with the 4 Skull Dragons, because then you can go Skull Dragon, Skull Dragon, Skull Dragon, Skull Dragon, Nightstorm, Skull Dragon. So just like that, you have an extra Skull Dragon attack either on Colombard or on Nightstorm, depending what your drop zone looks like. And you just win right then and there, because it's usually 4 to 5, 70k or more attacks that they just can't handle at all, on top of this 36 and this 23 or 28 or whatever the hell it ends up being. So that's just a really good finisher. That's why we always want to keep a Baskirk in hand, just in case that you know, okay, I'm gonna go for it right now. Then we have our 4 Nitros, basically the freest stride in the game, in the Granblue game that is. Basically calls you a full field. Like, sure, first stride she wouldn't, but first stride is Gouache. I really play this kind of still like a Nitros G deck, apart from the Lazy and Bone plays, but essentially calls a field. You choose what you call. She gets a crit, that's fun. We don't get the power boost because we don't play Nitroses, that's fine. Like, usually you would maybe get a +5 or a +10 anyway. You wouldn't see more unless you go full Nitros and you don't have Skull Dragons, but then what the hell are you doing? So +5, +10, maybe +15, like if you're lucky and really at the end of your game, but usually you don't. Meaning, I don't care about +5 if it means I have all the other cool stuff I just went over. Just free, just calls a full field. No further explanation needed, really. Then we have our 2 Gouache, the first stride. As I said, the more soul you have, the more this thing calls. If we had a stride that could build a full field on first stride without any limits, like a Harry can, I would do it, but we can't. Instead, we rely on Gouache together with a big soul to do that kind of stuff. Then we have 2 Songer. Now, I know some people are big fans of Songer and use him often. I don't, because like I said, we don't have Nitros on stride, so it's actually really hard to call a full field without the stride skills that we're using, like Gouache, Nitros, and Galleon. But it's an option. If you're able to call a big field even before Songer, go ahead and do Songer, then do your multi-attack Palooza, get your Night Mist, and get another column and so forth. Have fun. It doesn't come up very often. Then we play 2 Galleon. Now, this is a GB8, and some people would go, why the hell 2? You win on 1. You don't. Some games literally drag on that damn long, because this deck doesn't really, like, it doesn't push as hard as some people may wish it did. You will easily go, I played against Chris from Different Fight, against his DP deck. The first time I actually piloted this deck, I went to do Galleon, I did my thing, and then it was like, wait, I didn't win? Okay, pass turn, and then I have like no other Galleons. What the fuck do I do now? So I just went from this crazy ass huge beating, and then I had to go back into Songer or Nitros or something like that because I didn't win. So I run 2 Galleons. There are decks that can outlast the first, so you really want that second. Apart from that, there's this matchup, don't know if you know it, it's called a Gizeh. They don't give you counterblast. Like, they may give you 1 counterblast, but that's not enough. So having that extra Galleon allows you to play with very limited counterblast, and that way you do your Winnie thingy. The rest is G-Guards. I like G-Guard options. 1 Lily didn't really come up. We'll probably change it. I was very happy that it was SP, but usually it ended up being flip fodder for Mora. 1 Deep Corpse Dragon. If you didn't mill good shit yet, this guy will mill good shit for you. Then we have 1 Rectome. As I said in my Aquaforce premium profile before, I run this in almost every deck that relies on pieces. Aquaforce relies on pieces in hand. Granblue relies on pieces in the drop zone. So Rectome will help me when I'm clogged with grade 3s. I can just ditch another Skull Dragon, be very happy that it's gone, and then draw an extra card. Just like that, I fuel my drop zone and fuel my hand at the same time. Love this card. It's like a free Upstart Goblin or a free Jar of Greed. Very good. And then 2 Mora. Negro Mora is the reason this deck is good. To be honest, will Soul Blast 1, you flip something up, which puts you higher in G-Zone wise, which means that Nitros will do more calls and you'll be closer to GB8, and our GB8 is bonkers, so that's awesome. Apart from that, you can always get PGs. She says get a 0 and a 1. She says get 2 different grade cards from your drop and put them here. That's awesome, so you get usually the grade 1 PG and the Choppy if you want to mill some more, because you actually get to recycle Choppy with this card, or you get your draw PG in case you need a PG. Like, there are a lot of decks that go like, oh, I attack and you can't use PGs. Well, now you can. So that's what Mora is for. Mora is awesome, and you always want to run 2. There's no excuse to run 1. I saw some builds online that really look main deck wise like this deck, but then they run 1 Mora and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? So 2 at all times. She's the cornerstone of this deck, if you will. If you go up against Zoa, for example, the Zoa Bomb with Antlion, you will want to use this to get closer to GB8, but you will also want to keep 1 for when they do their Zoa turn, and then you just go like, lol, nope. So that's why you really want to run 2. So that is basically all for this deck. Hope you found this interesting. As always, be sure to pick up your beautiful 0 damage gaming playmat, whether it's Nitros or Baskirk or Maelstrom or whatever the hell. A link will be in the description. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I will see you soon. Ciao.